Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. A church located just outside of Edmonton has been shut down by Alberta Health Services. We have reaction from one of the pastors of Grace Life Church. It is Green Shirt Day, and many are paying tribute to Logan Boulet and the Humboldt Broncos, raising awareness for organ donation. And we hear from political reporter Brian Lilly, who explains why the Liberals have agreed with the Tories that there should be an inquiry into Ottawa's handling of the pandemic.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. A church in Spruce Grove, Alberta, which has been the focus of the province for holding full church services and breaking government health restrictions, has been shut down. In a release today, Alberta Health Services says they put up metal fencing and have physically closed Grace Life Church, preventing access to the building. The church's pastor, James Coates, who spent 35 days in jail, is going to trial for breaking the Public Health Act on May the 3rd. HS says with COVID-19 cases increasing and more severe variants becoming dominant, there's an urgent need to limit the spread to protect all Albertans. Government officials say between July 10th and April 6th, AHS received 105 complaints from the public about Grace Life Church. AHS inspectors have conducted 18 inspections at the site since last July, and they say violations were observed at each visit, which includes no masking nor physical distancing. Jake Spence is an associate pastor of Grace Life Church, and he joins me now via Zoom. Pastor Jake, how did it come to this with AHS shutting down your church?
Late January, AHS posted a closure notice on our building saying that it was closed to the public, but never changing the locks. And so we continued to meet faithfully for upwards of 8 weeks, 9 weeks now. And suddenly this morning, I awoke to a text message saying that the locks were being changed and a fence was being put up, and actually a double fence is being put up around the perimeter of the church, so the church facility. So it is concerning. It's unexpected. Of course, we were able to meet for Good Friday and Resurrection Sunday, which we were very thankful for. But obviously, with the new restrictions that came out, I think as of yesterday or midnight last night, essentially taking the province back to stage one of the restrictions, I guess.
So I guess it's safe to say that for now, Grace Life Church will join other churches in holding online services?
I think in the immediate future, we would go to online, and the hope is to continue gathering, of course, and I guess we'll have to look for a facility that would be sizable enough to meet our needs. We have been looking, but up until this point, there's been nothing that has materialized. So I guess, for this Sunday, unless something else is decided at this point, we would certainly hold an online service and live stream to Grace Life and all those who have been attending, via live stream up until this point.
So Pastor Jake, do you feel that the province has maybe overstepped its authority in shutting down the church?
The government has overstepped its bounds. We know that the Lord Jesus Christ is the head of his church. He has never delegated any authority in terms of the terms and circumstances of the church's worship to government, to any other governing body outside of the elders of the church. And so we certainly feel that government continues to overstep their jurisdiction. And at the same time, I mean, this is still could be viewed as an exciting time for the church itself, because if we just even simply look back in church history, we see even as early as, in Acts chapter 8, where Saul is persecuting the church and it causes the believers to scatter, and as a result of the scattering, the gospel is taken to Judea, Samaria, and ultimately to the ends of the earth. So this does not thwart the gospel in any way. In fact, I would say it would advance the gospel.
That was Pastor Jake Spence, associate pastor of Grace Life Church, located in Spruce Grove, Alberta, just outside of Edmonton, which was closed down today by Alberta Health Services. Many Canadians are feeling quite isolated and lonely during the pandemic. Pastor Ralph Molyneux with My Victory Church here in Lethbridge says what's difficult is how loneliness can impact our mental health and make it seem like no one cares.
Loneliness can cause us to maybe feel like people don't care for us, that they don't love us. And then our response to them can sometimes be out of anger or, frustration. And then that only increases our loneliness, because who wants to be around somebody who's always angry and bitter? So you kind of go back to what God's word says, is be forgiving and be kind and be gentle, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. They're just some practical things, but the first thing we want to really look at is to be honest with ourselves.
Pastor Ralph will also discuss the importance of connecting with others and creative ways of reaching out. That interview with Jeanette Rocher is coming up later in our broadcast. Canada is bleeding some green today. It's all in celebration of Green Shirt Day. The day was inspired by hockey player Logan Boulet, who donated his organ shortly after the tragic Humboldt Broncos bus crash in 2018. A car dealership here in Lethbridge was decked out in green today in honor of our local hero.
We wanted to deck out the dealership a little bit, obviously more of a memorial with the flowers just to remember those who did pass away, but also bringing and tying in the green as well. So we got custom made shirts, we got some posters going on just to raise a little bit of awareness. If you have not talked to your family about donating your organs, please do. It is something that is very beneficial and that is wanted right now. After the Green Shirt Day came about, there was over 150,000 people who actually did apply to donate their organs to people who needed it. So I would definitely say talk to your families about it and register.
The Boulet family started Green Shirt Day to not only remember the Humboldt Broncos and their son Logan, but to encourage Canadians to sign their organ donor cards. The Nanton Quality of Life Foundation is hoping to increase the well-being of seniors with dementia, including Alzheimer's, by providing a music and memory program. As Micah Quinn explains, organizers say this program helps to stimulate the brains of seniors who need it the most.
The Nanton Legion branch awarded funding to the Nanton Quality of Life Foundation to start up the Music and Memory program in 2017. The program works by giving seniors a personalized playlist filled with music on an iPod Shuffle that can then be played on headphones or a speaker at their homes.
It brings back fond memories, and it makes them so much happier. And there's lots of research on the fact that music can help you with depression and sundowning, and it's just a great program, a great outlet for those individuals.
The program isn't able to go into senior facilities due to the pandemic, but the foundation has found other ways of spreading the word.
However, in the last year, we have had a couple of families come in to our office, and we have told them about the Music and Memory program, and they have given us a list of the music that their loved one would like, and we were able to hook them up with the program right away. So although it is slow to start, there are a few people still in the lodge who are doing it, and a few people that are living on their own who are engaging in the program.
Lori Fyander is a community support worker for the foundation, and she says that this program gives seniors and their families more time to interact with each other.
It really kind of brings them out of their shell. It's like smell or sound will take you back to a certain time. And then when they do kind of come forward, it gives them more time to be together and spend more time together.
For more information on the Music and Memory program, you can call the Nanton Quality of Life Foundation. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Alberta officials announced yesterday that our province will head back to step one of the COVID-19 economic relaunch. Now, the Lethbridge Public Library will be returning to their curbside pickup model for now. The library is also celebrating a special day with Library Giving Day, which is a national fundraising event started in Seattle in 2019 to support local libraries.
Anything that's donated will go towards supporting our programs and services year-round. And as well as donating online, you can also, we have a special initiative we're launching today in partnership with Cuppers Coffee. They have made a special library blend. So if you go into Cuppers, you can pick up a blend called Reader's Roast, and a portion of that will come back to the library for every bag purchased. And that's going to be available starting today, and they will have it ongoing for the next couple of months.
Last year, over 20,000 people had a library card at the Lethbridge Public Library, and they were able to access over 800,000 books and physical items in the system. Restaurants have been ordered to close in-person dining once again, but patio service will still be permitted here in the province. Takeout orders are also being allowed as well, but the Alberta Hospitality Association says those sales represent just 5% of the industry, and the closure of indoor dining once again could spell the end of hundreds of more restaurants.
We can no longer invite people into our dining room. They've allowed us to keep our patios open, which is a plus side, but it's definitely a blow that we didn't want to happen. We are a pretty large restaurant, so we have quite a few staff members. Unfortunately, we can only keep bare minimal on for delivery and takeout, and most of our staff will be laid off for the weeks that we are closed for dine-in. It is the third time. The first time we didn't stay open for takeout. The second time we stayed open for takeout. And after we reopened, we've seen a significant increase in our delivery and takeout even while we were open for dine-in. So now we're going to open the patio even while we're closed, and we're hoping for a significant increase in our patio foot traffic. So we're just going to stay positive and keep doing exactly everything that we can.
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney said financial support for industries affected by the latest round of restrictions will be coming soon. So many industries have been hurt due to government lockdowns across the country. Now that also includes those in the sports and entertainment industries. Our poll question this week is, do you miss going to live sporting events or concerts? Make sure you log on to our website, bridgecitynews.ca, and simply vote yes or no and let your voice be heard. We'll have the results coming up on Friday's newscast. The Western Canadian Baseball League is to host a number of Southern Alberta clubs, including the Lethbridge Bulls, Medicine Hat Mavericks, and Brooks Bombers. Now, of the three, the Bulls are the only team that has official plans to play this season. The league has made some adjustments for this to happen, including an all-Canadian talent pool. Ainsley O'Reilly has the details.
For the first time in WCBL history, all rosters will be exclusively Canadian. With borders being closed due to the ongoing pandemic, homegrown talent will have more opportunities than ever.
A lot of times they're kind of passed over for the American players simply because the players are American and there's kind of that stigma. Canadian players just get overlooked because of that stigma when there's a lot of talent here.
5 of the 11 WCBL teams have announced they'll hold off playing until 2022. The Medicine Hat Mavericks and Fort McMurray Giants remain in limbo, while the Lethbridge Bulls are hanging tight that restrictions won't stop their season.
Stay optimistic and keep training for what is the perceived end goal, I guess, is play for a season and, got to keep going for that.
With the province announcing Tuesday that Stage 1 restrictions are back in place, the idea of fans in the stands appears distant in Alberta.
It doesn't feel like our league, I guess. You come here for the great fans in Lethbridge, and without them, it would suck.
For me, baseball is everything. Baseball is my life, right? And with people who don't want to follow the restrictions or things that go around like that, it makes it tough on people like me that you can't do something that you love. It's like if your job was everything to you and you're not allowed to go to that, it's the same thing for them, I guess.
Awaiting a green light from the province, the league plans on releasing an updated schedule, including season details at the end of the month. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
The Alberta government says as of Wednesday, more Albertans are now eligible to book a COVID-19 immunization as part of Phase 2 by either booking online through the AHS website or by calling 811. This will include Albertans with underlying health conditions born in or before 2005. Others who are allowed to have their shots include First Nations, Métis or Inuit born in 1971 or before, also for anyone born in 1956 or before. As for those non-Indigenous born between 1957 and 1966, the province says you're only able to be inoculated with either the AstraZeneca or the Covishield vaccine. More information is available on Alberta Health Services website. Calgary Mayor Naheed Nenshi says he will not seek a fourth term this fall. Nenshi was the first Muslim mayor of a large Canadian city when he was first elected in October of 2010. The 49-year-old, who has a master's degree from Harvard University, says leading the Stampede City has been the honor of his life. Nenshi, who oversaw Calgary through the massive flooding in 2013, says he never expected things could change so much with the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, there's no word yet if Nenshi intends to pursue federal politics, as some political pundits have suggested. BC's Provincial Health Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, says it'll be about a month before a COVID-19 variant known as B.1.1.7 makes up around 60% of new cases in her province.
So far, it is the B.1.1.7, the UK variant, that is dominating what we're seeing now in British Columbia. It's not the most common strain that we're seeing, but of the variants of concern, it is the most common, with 2,838 people identified carrying this strain. 51 people with the B1351, the South African strain, and that has mostly died down. We have not had new cases of that for a little while. What we have seen, though, is an increase in the last few months or few weeks of the P1 from Brazil. So this is a strain that we are testing for, screening for, and doing whole genome sequencing. And we now have 877 confirmed cases with this P1.
Dr. Henry and Health Minister Adrian Dix are encouraging British Columbians to pre-register for vaccine appointments online. Well, it was budget day in Manitoba, and the government was expected to cut some taxes and offer new money to fight COVID-19. Finance Minister Scott Fielding says there will be support for people who've been hurt financially due to the lockdowns. The province also said it will follow through on promises to begin phasing out on the education tax on property and eliminate the provincial sales tax on personal care services. Fielding says the province is predicting a $1.6 billion deficit. Saskatchewan plans to run deficits for 2 years longer than they planned to help pay for the costs associated with the pandemic. The budget table forecasts a deficit of $2.6 billion. The Moe government says the deficit will not be eliminated until 2026-27 instead of 2024-25 that was promised in the last fall's election. The plan calls for a 20% tax on the retail price of all vaping liquids, devices, and products beginning September 1st. Sask Power customers will get a 1-year 10% break on their power bills to help during these difficult times. A leading professor of epidemiology at Columbia University says the rise of variant COVID-19 cases can be stopped if more people get vaccinated and people adhere to public health restrictions, which includes wearing a mask and physically distancing.
The reason we're seeing a spike in variants or a growth in terms of how these variants are predominating amongst new infections is we have been vaccinating largely older individuals. In the short term, what we need to do is to stop transmission as soon as possible, as quickly as possible, and as we are expanding coverage with vaccines. So you can imagine that we need to work in two different dimensions or two different ways. One is rapidly scaling up vaccination, obviously as quickly as possible, and the other is preventing transmission from one person to the next. Because it's only through the transmission of the virus from one person to the next that is what allows these variants to be further transmitted, but also allows for new variants to be created as well. So we can't take our eye off the importance of the traditional public health preventive measures while we're expanding vaccination.
An apartment fire in Queens, New York left 21 people injured, including 16 firefighters. The blaze also displaced hundreds of residents. Around 400 firefighters responded to the blaze, which began on Tuesday afternoon. The 8-alarm fire was first reported on the top floor of the 6-story building. The tenant who lived in the apartment where the blaze began says it quickly spread after she left her door open. Well, it was another gorgeous spring day here in southwestern Alberta as we hit double-digit temperatures once again. Now, if you're looking for moisture, some good news is on the horizon. Full weather details are coming up. It was almost a perfect spring-like day here in Lethbridge as we got over 10 degrees once again. Jeanette Rocher is back with a full look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, for farmers in our region who have begun their spring seeding and are looking for a little bit of moisture, it may be in luck soon.
They sure will be, because we have a 60% chance of showers beginning tomorrow morning. And guess what? Even a possibility of some flurries in the afternoon and a risk of a thunderstorm, or maybe it'll be a snow thunderstorm by that time. I thought it was spring. What's happening here? The temperature dropping tomorrow to 6 degrees as well, and we're going to be seeing our winds up to 50 kilometers per hour. So tomorrow's going to be the crazy day in all of this. 15 degrees on Friday as the temperature climbs back up again. Mix of sun and cloud. We do have a 60% chance of showers on both Saturday and Saturday night. High of 6 degrees. 6 degrees also on a Sunday with a mix of sun and cloud. Up to 8 on Monday and 13 for next Tuesday. So we are in a little bit of a roller coaster. Pretty much staying in those seasonal averages though. Average high 11 degrees, average low -3. 24 was our high temperature back in 2005. And in 1975 we had a chilly one It was minus 16 on this day. 6:55 is when the sun rose this morning, and this evening our sunset right at 8:11 p.m. That is, not at 11. Nope, we're not quite there yet. 8:11 p.m. will be our sunset this evening. Into tomorrow, we're looking at the west coast here. Victoria's high 12 degrees, mix of sun and cloud. Pretty windy in the Juan de Fuca Strait still. 10 degrees in Vancouver, mix of sun and cloud. 7 in Edmonton and 5 degrees in Calgary. Calgary seeing a chance of flurries tomorrow. Showers and flurries also tonight in Edmonton, but should be clearing up by tomorrow morning. 14 the high in Saskatoon with a 30% chance of showers. 30 kilometer per hour winds. Regina, 16 degrees is the high, and 14 in Winnipeg. Regina going to be seeing some wind action as well, 30 to 50 kilometer per hour. Let's take a look at Toronto. This whole area just lovely. UV indexes all the way of 19 the high in Toronto, 22 in Ottawa with a mix of sun and cloud. Montreal's high 20 degrees with lots of sunshine, so should be lovely in that region. Over on the east coast, though, lots of precipitation. We got a chance of rain in Fredericton, 11 degrees the high, 13 the high for Halifax. Fog in all of these areas as well, including Charlottetown with a chance of showers there as well. Rainy, drizzly, 6 degrees the high, 5 degrees the high in St. John's with overcast skies with some onshore winds bringing some fog and some showers with it as well. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
The CEO of Enbridge says political obstacles to building new oil and gas pipelines will lead to higher valuations for those already in the ground. Al Monaco says that includes 2 Enbridge pipelines that are facing ongoing protests and legal challenges in the United States. Monaco says he's optimistic the company's Line 3 pipeline replacement will be put in service as scheduled by the end of the year. Enbridge is also continuing a court challenge of an order from Michigan's governor to shut down Line 5 pipeline through the Great Lakes. The restaurant industry in Ontario says last week's abrupt closure of outdoor and indoor dining has cost the sector at least $100 million. In an open letter to Ontario Premier Doug Ford, Restaurants Canada and the Ontario Restaurant, Hotel and Motel Association say wasted inventory, staffing costs, and patio setup and teardown are some of the expenses the restaurants have incurred since the province applied the emergency brake to slow the spread of COVID-19. They suggest making further funding available and introducing a sector-specific program for covering reopening and closure costs and ending the 6% markup restaurants pay for alcohol from the LCBO. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 24 points in the day to finish at 19,129. The Dow was up 16 points to 33,446. The S&P 500 was up 6 points to 4,080. And the NASDAQ was down 9 points to 13,689. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 44 cents to 59.77 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 6 cents to 2.52 US. Gold was up 3 cents to 17.3776 US an ounce. And silver was even on the day at 25.14 US an ounce. Wheat is at $305 per metric ton. Barley's at $320. Canola's at $7.90. And corn is at $340 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 43 cents to $123.15. Feeder cattle were up $1.15 to $147.63. And lean hogs were up 78 cents to $102.88. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 79.29 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, a church in Spruce Grove, Alberta, located just outside of Edmonton, which has been in the news quite a bit for hosting full church services and breaking government health restrictions, has been shut down. In a release today, the Alberta government says AHS has physically closed Grace Life Church by putting up fencing preventing access to the building. Government officials say between July 10th and April 6th, AHS received 105 complaints about Grace Life Church. The Trudeau Liberals actually agree with the Conservative leader, Aaron O'Toole, that a federal inquiry should be held into the Liberals' response of the COVID-19 pandemic. Political reporter Brian Lilly will have details for us in just a moment. Many of us were shocked recently to see 40,000 baseball fans in the stands in Arlington, Texas, as the Rangers hosted the Toronto Blue Jays. Go Jays, go. Lots of people were mocking the idea of fans in the stands. But you looked at the numbers, Brian Lilly, who joins us once again from Toronto, and you say people shouldn't be so quick to judge or even laugh, right?
No, they shouldn't, Hal. And, this is a shocking thing about COVID-19. In Canada, every conservative premier is the worst leader in the world and has the worst numbers in the world, except for evil Republicans in the United States who are even worse. And we should never learn from anybody else except do a better job than what we're doing now. That's what I keep hearing when I talk about Ontario COVID numbers or Alberta or anybody anywhere else. Oh, we should be doing better like so and so. Okay, let's look at Texas then, because right now Texas has a rate of COVID cases per 100,000 over the last week that's at about half of what Ontario's is. Ontario's at about 121, 122. Texas is at 67. Alberta's a bit below Ontario, I think at about 105, 107 in that area. But Texas is still below Alberta. In fact, they're below every major province, I think, except Manitoba at the moment. And they opened up a month ago. A month ago, it was Governor Greg Abbott just said, you know what? Every job's essential. Every business is essential. It's your choice whether you want to open or not. Major League Baseball came along. They were going to do like the New York Yankees did. I don't know if you watched any of the Jays Yankees series. They had about 20% capacity, and you had to have a vaccination or a negative COVID test to get in. Canada's ambassador to the United Nations, Bob Ray, was there, tweeted about it. Bob's, well into his 70s. He's got his COVID vaccine. Good for him. He went to the game. In Texas, they just said it is your personal calculated risk. So if you choose to buy a regular ticket, you're going to be sitting next to somebody you don't know and don't live with. Or you could choose to go sit in the socially distant section. But they gave you choices. That's not something that we really have here in Canada.
You know what's really interesting about Texas as well? One of the hardest hit regions, Texas, New York State, Florida, when the COVID pandemic first hit. Brian, the federal Conservatives are calling for an inquiry into Ottawa's handling of the pandemic, and the Trudeau Liberals have said, yes, that's the right thing. What's going on here?
Health Minister Patty Hajdu was asked about it. So Aaron O'Toole proposed this on which day? On Tuesday morning. He proposed it, and Patty Hajdu was asked about it later in the day, and she said yes, when the time's right. So not right now, but when the time is right. That is the right answer. Look, I'm not a fan of public inquiries. I think that they're bloated. I think that they cost too much money. I always point to the inquiry into Brian Mulroney and his dealings with Karl-Heinz Schreiber, and that cost us $16 million to find out that Brian Mulroney had bad judgment when it came to Karl-Heinz Schreiber. That's all we found out that we didn't know already. I would have told you that for $5. Take me out for a pint. I would have told you that. That's it. But these public inquiries can take on a life of their own. So I normally don't back them. In this case, I do. The Liberals have made sure that, just like they did with the WE scandal and SNC-Lavalin, they're trying to stymie House of Commons committees from doing their job. We are finding out an awful lot, much of it not looking good for the government. In fairness to them, no government would look good because it was a novel coronavirus. Nobody knew what they were doing. The whole world was melting in those early days. But I think a public inquiry is the right thing. Good on Aaron O'Toole for calling for it. Good on the Liberals for saying yes.
Brian, it appears as though Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and various ministers are pushing the provinces to vaccinate faster and use more doses in the freezers. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, this is part of the ongoing back and forth. Do you remember back in January, Justin Trudeau stood at the podium and said how he was frustrated, just like so many Canadians, over doses in the freezers instead of in arms. And then, wow, the doses stopped. And all of a sudden it was Premier saying, hey, wait a minute, where's those doses? We want to put them in arms. Where's the doses, buddy? And it's gone back and forth like that. Now we appear to have a glut in the system because we got a pile of doses arrive. And I'll just give you Ontario example, because those are the numbers I'm closest to. We had about 300,000 to 400,000 doses, and then more than 1 million showed up over the course of 2.5 days. And immediately, Liberal cabinet ministers and MPs start tweeting at the Ford government, why do you have so many doses in freezers? It's like they waited until they knew the deliveries had arrived. They show up on the publicly available data portal, and immediately they're saying, why are these doses there? And in one case, I think it was 300,000 in one shipment, more than 500,000 in another, and like right away. As anyone that knows anything about a project like this can tell you, just because 500,000 doses arrive doesn't mean you can get them in arms. The provinces do have to pick up the pace now that the vaccines are showing up. But I'll also tell you this, the provinces and local public health units are afraid of going too fast. And they look at what happened in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan was going faster than anybody else. In terms of a dose showed up, it went into an arm. And then there was the delay on the Moderna shipment, and they had to cancel 23,000 appointments. That's a lot of people to call up, cancel, and rebook. That's a lot of time and effort wasted. So most provinces have been keeping several days' supply back because the shipments are not always reliable. Sometimes that's been the government's fault, sometimes it's been the company's fault. But it makes sense to do that. Now we're getting an overabundance. The provinces do have to step up.
Now, Brian, you've watched the online debate and at times the arguments between politicians over whether it's a supply issue or distribution issue that keeps us behind in the vaccines. What did you really discover here?
It's a bit of both, and it depends on the time. I mean, it goes back to what I was just discussing about the 1 million doses show up over the course of a weekend, and immediately the Liberals are saying, why haven't you used them? You guys are hoarding them. Provinces are bad. Well, you know, at times it has been the fault of the federal government. You know, they have promised doses on a certain schedule, and those doses haven't shown up. Most provinces, Alberta included, British Columbia included, have said we want that 2 to 3 day supply at least as a backstop, because you think about scaling up to be able to vaccinate tens of thousands of people a day, which is what all the major provinces are doing. You know, well, Manitoba's talking about doing 7,000 a day. Well, in Alberta, you guys did 52,000 the other day. You did more than Ontario. We had a bad day. You guys did more vaccine doses than we did. If all of a sudden you're doing 52,000 doses a day and the supply dries up, you've got all those workers, all that space, all that equipment, and you've just got to shut it down. Okay, well, when do the doses come in? Well, if you don't have extra supply, you could be shut down for 2 or 3 days. It takes time to ramp back up. You don't just go from 0 to 52,000 again. It takes time to ramp back up. You've got to convince those people who you canceled on to reschedule and come back. So at times it is the federal government, at times it is the provinces. They should stop fighting, they should stop bickering, and just, you know, do the job of getting the population vaccinated so that we can go to a Jays game or something normal.
Can't we all just get along and, yeah, have our big foam fingers? Blue Jays #1, absolutely.
Yeah.
Brian, when you started tracking, Canada ranked, I believe, 12th in the world getting vaccines out. Then we dropped all the way down to 60th. Where are we ranking now?
It depends on how you count, but it's between like 52 and 55 at the moment. This is all from Our World and Data. And they track on a per capita basis how much of a population has been vaccinated. Some people say, oh no, we're well down into the 60s. That's if you don't take out the components that make up the United Kingdom. So they'll count the United Kingdom in that list, but then they'll have England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales. Well, you can't, that's like counting them twice. So depending on, there's a couple that are in dispute. Are they protectorates or are they on their own? We're between 52 and 55. That's not a good spot for a G7 nation to be in. That's not a good spot for a top 10 economy to be in. And look, I spoke to experts, you know, to go back to this, I hate to keep going back to the baseball game, but I spoke to experts about why is Texas doing so much better than Ontario when they've been open and we haven't. They said a couple things. One, variants of concern. I know that's something Alberta's dealing with. That's something we're dealing with. It's not something Texas is really dealing with, but also their pace of vaccination across the United States, and especially in their urban areas, has been far and above what we've been doing at double our rates or more. And so, you know, all of the reason this matters is while we're behind, we can't get back to that normal life, and we're watching other parts of the world that we normally compare ourselves do that very thing. Get back to living a normal life.
Amen to that. Brian, the United States has long been called the global police force, and now apparently they want to become the global tax force or the global tax man. There's word that the U.S. is calling for a global minimum corporate tax and at the same time threatening to punish countries that tax tech giants.
Yeah, isn't that bizarre? They want Canada to increase its minimum corporate tax rate. And at the same time are telling Canada, don't you dare tax Netflix or Facebook or Google. Look, I know people don't like the idea of a tax on Netflix, but Netflix sells things that if they were the company that I work for or the company that you work for, they'd have to pay GST on. They don't have to charge that right now. So, let's put it this way. There is a Canadian streaming service called Crave. Crave has to charge the GST or the HST, depending on what part of the country you live in, and Netflix doesn't. That's a tremendous advantage. So Canada has looked at saying, we're going to charge the same tax. We're going to put everyone on the same level playing field. It's not a horrible idea. I may think taxes are too high, but I think that if you're going to set a tax rate, treat everyone the same. The US is saying if countries do that, we'll punish them. But at the same time, Donald Trump lowered the US corporate tax rate. And the reason he did that was too many companies were keeping money overseas. They were shifting jobs overseas. He lowered it, and immediately thousands of jobs came back and billions of dollars came back. That money, as it was reintroduced into the United States, was taxed at a lower rate than it had been, but the government still got a cut. The Democrats say no, corporations should pay more, but they know that if they increase the taxes, those jobs and that money will just go overseas again. So Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, is saying everyone should charge a minimum of 28%. I'm sorry, Hal, that's a bad idea. Canada's economic advantage going back more than a century under all governments has been have a lower tax rate for corporations than the Americans do. It makes us attractive to invest in. So when you combine our federal 15% with our provincial rates, which vary province to province, we're looking at the low to mid 20s range. So we end up being a little bit below them. Not tremendously, it's not a race to the bottom, but it's a little bit of an edge there. And we offer in a few other things, and companies will say, you know what, I'll invest in Canada. That'll disappear under this. Horrible idea. I hope the Trudeau government says no.
Brian, the former head of the Bank of Canada and Bank of England, will be a featured speaker at a virtual conference as the Liberals are discussing ideas like a universal basic income. Can you explain to our viewers why many people may not be for a universal basic income?
Sure, and it'll be interesting to see how Mark Carney, who's the former Bank of Canada and Bank of England governor, describes issues like that. There's a lot of wonky people, and Mark Carney is nothing if not a wonky person. He looks like someone who come out of an early 1960s sitcom with the clean-cut look. He could have been the neighbor on Bewitched or something. But he and others will be discussing these ideas of a universal basic income, and this is the idea that whether you work or not, you get money from the government. We had a pilot project here in Ontario. I know that Pierre Trudeau did one in Flin Flon, Manitoba, back in the 1970s, but we had a more recent example just a couple of years ago where the Kathleen Wynne Liberal government of Ontario brought one in. And Doug Ford came in and said, I'll scrap that. I'm getting rid of it. It's a bad idea. So the NDP opposition found a couple of people that they said were terribly hard done by this getting rid of this universal basic income. And so I looked into their stories, and one guy was someone who had worked at a bank for years, on management track, making decent money, but quit so that he could design logos for free or in exchange for breathing lessons, yoga classes, acting classes. And he was able to live and pay his rent and enjoy his life because the government gave him money for not working. Another woman had posted online about buying $700 per ticket Elton John seats to go to a concert. So I work hard for my money, and that's not something I'd spend my money on. I'd go to see Elton John in concert, no problem with that. But those are expensive tickets. Why could she afford that? She was on the universal basic income. There are arguments that some economists make, and it's a very theoretical one, that if you get rid of all the other social programs and just have this one, that's a good idea. That's never how it's been introduced in Canada. They always keep all the other social programs and then give you tens of thousands of dollars more. It doesn't work. It discourages work.
Brian, we only have about a minute left here. China is bashing Canada once again. This time it involves a little bit of name calling. But more importantly, do we finally know what happened in the two trials involving Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig? Are they coming home?
We don't know, and it could pop up at any moment. The Chinese are very secretive about that. But because of our statements on the cases of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, because of our success in rallying international support, they're lashing out. This is a good thing. Iran did this to Canada for years under the Chrétien and the Harper governments. They call you names, they denounce you in state media. My only disappointment with this is I've written some pretty harsh columns of the Chinese government. They have still not called me out, and they're not above calling out individual media outlets when they don't like the coverage. Let them call us names. It means we're getting under their skin.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
Loneliness is often an issue in our society, but with the COVID pandemic, it appears to be on the increase. What's the best way to deal with this? Joining me to discuss this further is Ralph Molyneux. He is the site pastor at Victory Church in Lethbridge. Welcome to Bridge City News, Pastor Ralph. It's so great to have you on today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Pastor Ralph, a recent Ipsos poll revealed that 54% of Canadians say that they're feeling lonely and isolated. So is this consistent with what you're observing in people here in Southern Alberta, with your pastoring and your counseling?
Yeah, absolutely. I think some, depending on personality types, are dealing with it better. And some people, they're still doing all the work that they normally did, but others who were forced to isolate and maybe hadn't, cut back on their connections, I can see that being extremely difficult for them. And not only loneliness, but relationship struggles. People's emotional health is struggling because of their emotional, just the things that they're going through.
Exactly. I think it caught everyone by surprise. And all of a sudden we're just finding ourselves in this situation with loneliness. Now, it's interesting that medical studies show that loneliness can cause a number of health issues, including depression, anxiety, increased risks of dementia, and even 26% increased risk of death. So this isn't a trivial thing at all, is it?
No, it's not. And I like that they mention it as a state of health, because those things can deteriorate over time and we don't notice it, so your emotional health and that loneliness, that part of it can just whittle away at you over time. Like, we used to celebrate weddings with large groups of people, and then in times of struggles like funerals, where you used to have those connections, but with a period of time that we don't normally have that in our life, then that deteriorates our overall emotional health. And it can happen like the frog in the boiling water. It happens to a point where all of a sudden people are by themselves and not able to process some of the things they're struggling with.
Absolutely. I'm sure you're seeing that a lot with your counseling, especially like you said, funerals. We can't be together to grieve our loved one. We can't be together to celebrate somebody getting married. It's just tough.
Yeah. Yeah. The funerals are, the physical touch, none. There's no hugging. I'm not a person that likes to hug a whole bunch, just my personality type, but at times like that, it's non-existent. So there's more times in our life that we experience these changes that again whittle away at our emotional health.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you mentioned physical touch, because doctors, of course, say that it's so important, that physical touch is crucial, right? So apparently our health even increases significantly when we get regular hugs and handshakes, and maybe it needs to be done while wearing a mask. I don't know, but we do need that, don't we?
Yeah, we do. And I think I've heard it explained this way before, but because that's lacking, I think it was Dr. Townsend or Dr. Cloud, one of the Christian psychologists, said that we all love steak. We all love a good steak, but hamburgers are good too. So it's not the way that we're connecting isn't the best way, but it's still got some value to it, and we have to look at the bright side on that. When we can't have the physical hugs and those types of things, then at least to connect virtually is still better than nothing.
Yeah. So I was just going to ask you, Pastor Ralph, do you have any thoughts on how to overcome loneliness? The obvious solution is to spend more time with others, but that becomes a real challenge, obviously, during these COVID times. So people, of course, are making the use of technology, like you said.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to do is to give yourself an assessment and be honest with yourself and true to yourself. If you're noticing that you're withdrawing from things, or you're finding there's conflict in your relationships, which is what we see a lot of that conflict increases, and that means that there's something missing from your life. And if you kind of analyze it and see where you're at, you can find some next steps to do, the right thing, because loneliness can cause us to maybe feel like people don't care for us, that they don't love us. And then our response to them can sometimes be out of anger or, frustration. And then that only increases our loneliness, because who wants to be around somebody who's always angry and bitter? So you kind of go back to what God's word says, is be forgiving and be kind and be gentle, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. They're just some practical things, but the first thing we want to really look at is to be honest with ourselves. And then I think sometimes people get tired and want to just fix things for people, when really all they're asking for possibly is just a bit of empathy, to understand that they're struggling. And it's in that empathetic moments that we can really connect at a deeper level with people. So I think just to be kind of in tune with what's going on, and look at our environment, what we've been experiencing, and then be more prepared that way, and not over expecting things from other people, because that can be a real a drag on people. If all you ever talk to is that one friend that's just always got so much going wrong, your tendency might not be so much to connect with them, which is the exact opposite of what they need. They just need someone just to hear them. They may not need all the answers or the solutions. Just a lending an ear is really important.
Yeah, for sure. Now, like we said, technology can help, but with some of the older generation, a lot of them might not be as technically savvy. So, I mean, it's still okay to use the telephone as much as possible, get connected with people. But of course, medical experts say that there are significantly greater benefits to social relationships by making time for those face-to-face visits. So I guess the question here is, what is the risk or benefit ratio of visiting people in person during these times?
Well, I think we have to analyze those individuals, because I've met with many of our seniors, and we when COVID first hit, we did what we called CareNet, where we called every single person, and we empowered a bunch of people to call people, which is very unusual. To get a call from a stranger nowadays is like, why are you calling me? But because of the times, we found it really necessary. And I noticed the seniors that I spoke with were so appreciative of just a call or a contact. Because I don't know. I think when we get older, and I'm getting older, I don't know that we get out as much anyways, and I'm not belittling the importance of that initial contact, but I think our seniors are pretty resilient people. But just a touch or a phone call, and or a driveway visit, or a visit through a door, just a few moments of connectivity, I found to be so beneficial, especially with our senior crowd.
Oh, exactly. I know my own mother is in that situation, and I feel like for the past year, it's been nothing more than just really quick, hand each other something in the driveway or through my car door. It's very challenging, because you want to spend all this quality time. And of course, now it's getting warmer outside, so we can arrange for more meetings outdoors. So is that a good solution as well? Meet at a coffee shop patio?
Absolutely. I've been doing a lot of Zoom counseling, mainly because to meet someone in person, if you're indoors, you should be wearing a mask.
Yeah.
But another thing I've been doing is walks, and there's multiple benefits from that. So you'll see me 2 or 3 times a week walking around Henderson, just connecting with somebody around, the lake here in our town, and or the coulees. And I think, again, if we look at it in a positive way, I just say, hey, how'd you like to go for a walk? And then the individuals typically go, yeah, I'm up for that. And then you're both, there's multiple benefits to that, but it feels good to be outdoors as well. But then to see their face not behind a mask is also really important.
Oh, absolutely. Now, how can churches help relieve loneliness? Any thoughts on how to include people who are on their own?
Well, we've just launched a Facebook campus. So there's much more connectivity during the service, because what we found is many people were just watching the screen as a church, and you can watch a screen anywhere, but we were responding much more one-on-one in that aspect through our Facebook campus, which just launched. But we still invite people out, and then we watch that connectivity online, and then ask them if there's anything. Just ask them if there's anything we can do, for them. They need a hand with something. Is it a physical need, or maybe it's finances or groceries or things like that. And then in that, we also have been inviting people to begin to serve, because I found that many people wanted to be busy doing something rather than sitting in an empty house. So at that point, we said, well, let's empower you to do those care calls. And how would you like to connect with 10 people each week, just to see how they're doing, just a 10-minute conversation or 3-minute conversation. So to get people active, I think is a real key thing to keep the loneliness down, because, we're made on purpose for a purpose. And when that changes, we need to get active and just say, okay, look, we're just not going to sit locked up. There's things we can do even in that state. And churches have been, I believe, instrumental in caring for that health of other individuals in our community through this whole deal.
That's wonderful. Now, for disabled individuals, the loneliness factor apparently doubles, and that's something to keep in mind during these times, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I hats off to anybody who's caring for an individual, because, in some cases it's a matter of life and death. But I think through the studies and things like that, we still did our Night to Shine this year, but we sent out the packages to everybody. So for each of those individuals, maybe within whatever the issues are, to receive that package in the mail and then to connect with them just virtually a little bit made a difference. So again, receiving, there's other ways we can connect with people through gifts and dropping a meal, or, just a card, or even, something that was special to them, that they feel loved. And I think that's really, really important for every individual.
Yeah, absolutely. For our viewers that don't know, what are in the packages for Right to Shine?
Well, in those, it was a crown, and I think they got some party favors, like, different items that they could kind of have a celebration together, because that was what it was. Night to Shine was a celebration, like almost like a graduation for them. And so that was what they would receive in their package. And then we just encourage them just to connect with a photo and send that back, to our team here. And then at least it was another event, different, but it was something that they got used to look forward to yearly, and that didn't stop. It just was different. That's all.
Right. Now, what about for children? Any thoughts on how to get kids engaged and not to fall into that pit of loneliness, or that pit of just all that screen time too?
Well, you see a lot of people doing very unique things, like drive-bys for birthday parties. I know both of my grandkids, we visited them through COVID at times, sometimes through a window, or through Zoom, or FaceTime. But you can get pretty creative in getting things active with kids. But I also know that kids are really good at connecting online. They've done that for years, where they've got gamer friends and game tags that they are connected with, and that's, they're sitting in their basement, for hours on end. But I think the important part, what you mentioned on, was how do you get them out? And as parents, like a scooter, a skateboard, any kind of gift that gets them outdoors is probably the best for them right at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it's ironic because we want to keep our kids off the screen. There's too much screen time going on. But during COVID, like you said, it's a great way for them to connect. So you almost are kind of almost thankful for all that screen time. They can connect with other communities, like you said, gamer communities and whatnot. But absolutely exercise and get outside now that it's springtime, especially, right?
Yes, exactly.
And then, of course, where would we be without the Word of God, right? Seeking His presence.
That's very true. I'm going to share a little scripture with you guys. 1 Peter 3 says, "Who's going to harm you if you're eager to do good? But even if you should suffer from what is right, you are blessed. Don't fear threats. Do not be frightened, but in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks, and give a reason that the hope that you have." And that's one thing we can share during this whole season and continue to share, is that we do have the hope of Christ in our lives, and He has a purpose for us. And if you want to partner with an organization I think that's a really good way to battle loneliness, is to get out and help someone else who's also in need. And you're likely to make a connection that way if you're empathetic to their situation, and you're managing your own personal mental health as well. But I think this is a real time for the church to shine and care for our communities.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being with us today, Pastor Ralph. We really appreciated having you on.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. Ralph Molyneux is the site pastor at My Victory Church in Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.